company isn't going to succeed. So just to reiterate the point, management is really about the people. Now, I would issue a caveat that given the short time we have, even if we had a full hour, we're not really going to cover all the things you need to do as entrepreneurs or as incubators or as leaders of biotechnology companies, however you want to describe yourself. So what I'm hoping to do today is maybe plant a few seeds for some ideas of things that you may want to take away and think about, and maybe come back and maybe we can discuss some other time, or maybe we can take it offline, some other way to follow up. But the main thing to remember is to be realistic about the expectations, but do try to take something away from this webinar. It might only be one thing, but that one thing could make a very large difference. This is a little graphic. I said I could mention my book once, the Biotech Manager's Handbook, so I put that at the end. But this was a graphic when I was writing this chapter in the book with Emily Sun, who's a consultant here in London, who's worked in US, Canada, UK, Europe, Far East. And we spent a lot of time discussing where this line goes, and maybe for each person here it will be different. But the important point here is that whether it's 10% or 50%, but a huge amount of management of companies is actually invisible. It doesn't really fit into the easy KPIs or key success factors, anything like that. Because your certain amount of your management is obvious. Your analysis, your strategic thinking skills, your technical skills. And obviously then they're easy things to measure because you plan, you coordinate, you direct. All that's quite important. But underneath that, there's a lot of work that goes on to make somebody a successful leader, a successful manager. And that really are the kind of, again, what I think a scientist often calls soft skills. That's listening, understanding, showing empathy, and really building trust in relationships. And the main point about this is that this isn't something you try to do when things are going badly or things are tough, because in small companies things are usually pretty tough. But you build the relationships in the good times, so the relationships are there in the tough times. So you don't wait till things are going badly wrong to start trying to build bridges with people. One of the things a leader does is that they go to meet people, they go and talk to people, they build the relationships with people all along the way. You don't start business development, for example, just when you have your product. People should already know you, and you should be out there, you should be talking to people. So I'll just leave you with that point, and then maybe people can start thinking about where in their work they're doing the invisible work and matching against the visible work. So when Wright contacted me about doing this webinar, he said, he just asked the question, you know, a lot of the investors, for instance, people have in some countries, they don't really understand why biotechnology is so different and why people need to be paid so much, or why they need to be treated differently. And he said, maybe you need to explain to people why managing in biotechnology is not like managing hairdressers. And I thought it was a very good question, because to be honest, I don't know anything about hairdressing. In fact, if you've seen my photo on the web, you probably understand I don't spend a lot of time in hairdressers. So what I did in this little slide was try to think about what's the difference between your biotechnology and just an ordinary little business, like what would be something like your average startup business. And I think, and then we have to think about in what way these key differences change the way we behave as leaders and as managers in biotechnology companies. So first of all, I think you could say that hairdressing is a very high skill, but obviously there's a huge amount of technical skill involved in biotechnology. So I think the best way to measure that is in the long education and training, and I don't know quite how long it takes to become a hairdresser, but I'm pretty certain most people are trained up within a year or two. You know, you start off sweeping the floor and you end up, you know, washing hair, and then you eventually like to cut hair. In biotechnology, you're at least doing a degree before you do any of that, maybe a master's, maybe a doctorate, and before you've earned anything at all. So people always have an expectation that they must in some way be compensated for this very long period without earning. There's also something very vocational about it. Now, I don't know if that word means everything to everybody, but the important thing is that people do biotechnology, healthcare, because they think it's a good thing to do. You know, people are very highly motivated in biotechnology. You know, people are trying to find a cure for cancer, to find a cure for that disease, find a cure for Alzheimer's. You know, everybody knows somebody who has Alzheimer's, somebody who's had cancer. So people have a very powerful emotional involvement in the work that they do. we'll come back later on to talk about the personality types of scientists, but generally, I think it's pretty much true to say that in science, and as the personality of scientists, that we're very much results focused and task focused rather than focused on people. If you like, the stereotype of the scientist is the expert who isn't particularly socially outgoing. We might want to argue with this, but I think even statistics will show that that's what what people tell us. But for example, in your average shop, in your average hairdresser, people just tend to be very, very sociable. People become hairdressers because they like to work with people. That is often not what people like about being biotechnologists. In fact, they like doing the science because sometimes they don't have to deal with people. They love working on their cells. They love working in their room on their own. So you would think on the basis of that the biotech world isn't one that's particularly sociable. So that's why I put 1 star. But of course, clearly, the whole world of surviving as a small company is a very, very network-dependent business. And there are a number of studies showing that the better connected companies are, the more likely they are to survive. And that is particularly true of their senior management. Their CEO, their board is a major determinant of their success. And that success is driven by being very, very well connected. And that takes a certain kind of social skill. You have to get out there, you have to go to conferences, you have to know people, you have to meet people, you have to be able to pick up the phone and talk to people. And if you like behaving as the typical scientist who just kind of likes to talk about data and isn't particularly sociable, that's difficult. And one of the issues I've seen again and again with companies who are science-based is their difficulty in doing anything related to business development because they simply don't enjoy complex social situations. They don't like going to conferences and not knowing anybody. They don't like picking up the phone and talking to strangers. And they do find this difficult. The other point I think just in terms of maintaining the education is just how much effort is involved in maintaining the status quo, if you like. You cannot just graduate and never study ever again. You really have to keep up to date. And everything that we studied as undergraduates now looks like ancient history. So there's a huge amount of time that's required just to keep up to date that isn't really relevant in other, say, small startup businesses like a hairdresser's. And that also has implications. What it means is that a huge amount of somebody's time is spent doing basically research, almost invisible research. It's not adding to the profitability or productivity. It's just stopping it from declining. Now, a very important point is the role of marginal knowledge. That a tiny advantage can make a huge difference in biotechnology. If you really understand your business, if you can understand something that you can make into IP, you're creating a vast amount of value. You can't trademark or patent or anything else, or even a design in other industries. The understanding of the nature of IP and understanding how a tiny difference can make a huge additional difference, I suppose, to the value of a company has to be borne in mind. And these have implications for how you manage people. So much of the value of your company actually is locked up in the heads of the people you're working with. Whereas if you lose a hairdresser, you lose a hairdresser. Even a very good one, you can always get another one. Clear career path. I think we used to talk in the old days about having careers in biotechnology and that you went to work in a company, you stay there for many years and you rose up through the company. And this was sometimes maybe true in countries where you have a very large pharmaceutical industry. I mean, when I started to work in Merck, 25 years ago now, we had technicians. There were 7 grades of technician. There were graduate grades. There were 6 grades of graduate. There were PhD grades. There were like 8 grades of PhDs, and then there was 10 management grades, and every single one of those was very clearly defined. I remember when I started at Merck, I was given my desk and my chair, and I had just finished my PhD, but it hadn't been awarded yet. I had started between finishing my PhD and obviously then just the official awarding of it. And the day that my PhD was awarded, somebody came along and put arms in my chair because graduates weren't allowed arms in their chair, but PhDs were. So I got my arms. Small companies can't do that kind of thing anymore. It's kind of crazy. Business awareness. I think people forget how important it is for everybody in the company to know more about the business, but I think that's probably true for every business. But we're not going to talk about it today, but obviously one of the big issues with biotech is how long you're in business before you start to make any money. You simply couldn't run a hairdresser if you were running 2 or 3 years without making any money. But that's an issue for your business models rather than today. So I hope that this sounded like a trivial exercise, but I hope already it's showing you that there are things that are different about the people who work in biotechnology. And I think this kind of summarizes those points, if you can still see these slides. Firstly, that the people who work on them generally have very high expectations. They've put a lot of investment into their own education, their background, their formation as professionals, and they expect to see returns on it. They expect their careers, they expect to be involved in decisions, they expect to talk about it. You can't really expect somebody to spend 7 or 8 years studying, doing a doctorate, and then just go away quietly and work in a dark lab. In small companies, especially biotech companies, again, every employee makes a huge marginal difference. If you're only 6 people in a company, it's not just 16%. If you lose one person, you could lose 20, 30% of productivity because of the interrelatedness of what everybody does. It's also important to bear in mind that no one person will have all the skills and knowledge needed. Biotechnology companies in general are working in an incredibly complex area of expertise, and nobody knows all of it. Even the smart, if you're the greatest professor of genetics or you're the best oncologist in the world, you will not know enough to run even a small biotechnology company, right? All of the strands of whether it's the commercialization, business, all of these things become incredibly complex very quickly. So there has to be a certain amount of team specialization and role specialization. And we can't have harmony all the time because of this. That certain people will ask certain kinds of questions, certain personal styles will ask certain kinds of questions. And these are a source of conflict and difficulty within small organizations. And that's really what we're going to try and talk about today in the time we have left. So just to give you a small example, one of the things that you see in so many small companies is the style tends to be very informal. Now again, I think it's probably true of my experience of working in, say, in Spain and in Scandinavia, in the Baltics, is that people just tend to like being informal. It's a very personal, it's a very easygoing way, it's very ad hoc. But the content of the companies has to be formal, has to have lots of processes, and has to be very strategic. And there's already a conflict within organizations, almost from day one, about, nobody calls each other doctor, nobody calls each other by titles, but the actual content of the work has to be incredibly formalized. You have to keep a record of everything. You have to, because we're in a very highly regulated industry. Hopefully everybody will be working to something that one day will be at least audited externally for contracts, or whether you're going for registration, for market approval. Somewhere along the line you're going to come up against a very, very high level of due diligence. Maybe if you're doing a deal, your company is going to be inspected. And the level of paperwork you need, recording of processes you need is very, very important. And as I said at the outset, you still have to be incredibly strategic. A small company that doesn't have a strategy isn't even going to stay a small company very long. It's going to wither and die very quickly because you get blown around the place by events. Now, I would just like to point out at this stage, there's a sort of let's take a breather here. So you can read this.
Yes, this can be.
Just taking a sip of water. One of the problems. Sorry? Have you a question?
No, everything's okay. Just continue.
Very good. That when I read a lot of management books, I think they're trying to make people believe that to be successful in business, you have to be some combination of Mahatma Gandhi and Albert Einstein. You have to be a genius scientist and a marvelous person. And that isn't actually strictly, in fact, it's not true at all. It's a myth that doesn't really help anybody. And in fact, to be honest, you don't even have to be particularly perfect or normal. And in fact, if you know anybody who's a successful entrepreneur, you sometimes think they're not even particularly sane. Because they can be very driven people. Entrepreneurs, for example, in the executive coaching world are regarded as particularly difficult clients because they're very successful. They don't need external advice. Or they think they don't need external advice, and they're often wondering, why is somebody bothering them with this thing, this external feedback and stuff. So it does help. But I think it does help if you know a little bit about yourself and also how your style interacts with other people. And that's really, I think, the key thing we're going to try and deal with today. And I think if you are a leader in an organization, or if you're incubating things where you're actually helping create a culture of this, it really is important to remember that the leadership of any organization has a huge role in setting the culture of an organization, the tone of an organization. And organizations really do in many ways reflect the personalities and the styles of their leaders. I go to some companies and they're very high energy, almost nervous, anxious places, and I go to some companies that are very quiet and relaxed. And it's no surprise then when you go and meet the CEO that you find a very relaxed person, you find a very high energy, almost neurotic person. It transmits itself to the entire organization. And I would go as far, as I said earlier, so knowing more about yourself can actually help you see how you interact with others and get more differences. So this isn't asking anybody to make major changes in their personality, not to try and become a perfect person, but just to make allowances for how their personality interacts with other people. And I think this kind of self-awareness really is a core managerial skill. I don't know how many of you have ever seen this before. This is called the Johari Window. This is a basic scheme used in psychology, and as a consultant you always have to try and reduce everything to a 2x2 matrix. Well, this is the classic 2x2 matrix, and it's about what we know about ourselves and how we appear to others. And what this is just trying to get at is there's a part of us that's open and public that we know. So I have a public persona, I come and talk to people, they know me, and this is a part of we can discuss, we can say, okay, this is the Michael, I met you guys in Tallinn 2 years ago, I met you guys in Barcelona 5 years ago, so there's that public persona. But there's also maybe a part of me that, not everybody knows, or I might have a secret talent, I might have a secret interest in life, something like that. And there might be something about myself that I'm not aware of that might be obvious to everybody else. We tend to shield ourselves from things about ourselves we're not comfortable with, we don't know. And then in the deep unknown, there's almost a kind of a part of ourselves that we keep hidden, whether they're dark fears, but that's more of an area for, if you like, counseling or therapy rather than consulting. So generally what we deal with is we deal with ourselves in the, if you like, in the 1, 2, 3 boxes here, the bits of ourselves that are open and know, but sometimes we have to dip into 2 and 3 as well to really come to know what we need to do. And I found a very interesting book on this topic many years ago, called Developing Management Skills in Europe. I don't know why it was called specifically in Europe, but they actually, interestingly, put self-awareness as the core, again, at all of the management skills, because it allowed you then to do this. So they said it was an embedded skill that allowed you to do priority and goal setting, that allowed you to do time management, and really a very, very key thing, and I think anybody who works in companies now has to understand this, is all about stress management, and about how successful companies aren't really blown around the place by their latest stressor. That if you can just keep calm when everybody about you is losing their heads, that's a real sign of a good manager. That what you're learning is that a good leader is somebody who's calm in times of crisis, and that really comes, I think, from their own depth of self-awareness. And one of the things that, again, on the slide that I thought was interesting, that as these people explained it, was that from your self-awareness you can build your strategy, right? And that you really know then what you're trying to. You don't get drawn into tactics all the time. You don't get involved in or get too much lost in the day-to-day tactical stuff. In the same way that you don't misidentify symptoms of problems for problems in a company. So many times when I went to companies and we were talking, people would say, "Oh, we have a problem," but essentially it was a symptom. And my job as a consultant was often really to try and find out what the problem underlying that symptom was, what was behind all those symptoms. Because if the same thing keeps occurring and occurring and occurring, that's not a symptom, that's a problem that you have to try and deal with. By the way, I don't believe that you go around just solving your problems willy-nilly. Some companies need problems, and if you haven't got a problem, your company probably isn't pushing up against anything, you're not trying hard enough. But you really have to understand your problems before you go around solving them. This, again, will strike you maybe perhaps as very obvious, but sometimes the difficulties in working with other people can be rooted in the fact we're not really aware of how we are interacting with people. And there's a very simple and practical basis for this, is that when you work with people, you have your opportunities and the chances of changing other people are actually quite limited. You can't demand that the people who work for you are smarter, or that they're nicer people, or that they do more. Well, maybe you can do that. But you can change yourself. You can take responsibility for yourself and your reactions. So in a sense, part of what learning to do with people at a higher level of management, when you move, for instance, to your own company, when you're responsible for everything, the level of responsibility becomes enormous. And you have to be more aware of how you react, what your stresses are, what your triggers are, and how you cope with those before you even deal with other people. And in a sense, once you become more aware of your own style, then you can actually deal better with other people. Now, of course, there are a whole range of dimensions on which people can differ. And again, you can't just reduce things to a simple 2 by 2 here, because people have very different ways of thinking, they have very different ways of learning, they have very different values, and these are very culture dependent as well. One of my concerns about many of the management books that I read about, as part of my study in this area, is they're very US oriented. And I'm not sure that a lot of these US sort of very extrovert, very almost kind of overly positive is how I see them. Maybe this makes me a cynical European, but I'm not actually sure that they're culturally sensitive to the way we are in different European countries. And I know across different European countries there are different cultural approaches to many of these things as well.
Michael, can I ask something?
Please.
Yeah,
sure.
I was thinking that if you are speaking about cultural differences across the continents and countries, as far as I know, that in general there shouldn't be that many differences across countries when we speak about individualities or kind of the personal styles. Yeah, I understand correctly that what you are saying, that in some extent you think that the people in US in terms of psychological profile are different?
No, I'm not saying that they're valuing a particular kind of personality.
Okay.
That I think they're pushing kind of a cultural value that I don't think we always. I think so. It's a different one from, I think, cognitive and learning styles. Certainly, what I find is that within companies, if I'm there a day or so, you can almost tell who the medicinal chemists and the biologists are, no matter where you are in Europe, no matter where you are in the world. That the cognitive styles are a bigger indicator than cultural ones. But within the values of many management books, I think I find there's a very strong kind of US-centric view of the world about what they're trying to achieve.
Okay, thank you. I understand now. So what you're saying is that values are far different, and the books are built on the certain values in US.
That's my impression, and maybe if other people want to chip in at the end, because I think we have quite a sweep across Europe here, so maybe people might want to chip in about that. So I'll move on to so for example, this has been an area of study for a very long time. Actually, I have to confess here, I did my undergraduate thesis some 30 years ago on adapters and innovators. And this was an idea that was becoming popular at the time around organizational style. It was called by this guy called Michael Curtin, and there actually still is a website, there still is an institute that works on this. And these are the two kind of stereotypes. The adapters are the kind of in English they call them the steady Eddie, the guy who sees it through, who works hard, keeps the head down. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. A real sort of charter for the kind of seeing things through to the end and being very steady and applying lots and lots of effort, whereas the innovators on the other side, championed here by Einstein, imagination is more important than knowledge. Just very free and easy, don't like too many rules, like to try and keep things flowing. And this system is still used, but actually I couldn't find a useful way for measuring it for you. So if you're interested in following up on that, you can actually type in these words and you'll actually find websites that will take you to more information on it. You can actually download questionnaires to use in your organizations and things like that. But there are other more commonly used ones. Now, again, I have no idea what level of experience people have with these particular concepts. They've been used for a very long time in industry and are almost standards. You can get these done. If you look at these websites, for example, you can actually get some of these personality types done for free. Generally, you pay more for a report or something else, but they're based on core human differences. Now, everyone's probably heard of introversion and extroversion. That doesn't mean that one person is intensely shy or timid and the other person is, it's kind of a showbiz personality. It really means where you're most comfortable. And some people are most comfortable thinking in their own thoughts, and other people derive, if you like, a lot of benefit and extra benefit from discussing ideas and things. And that really is the core of introversion, extroversion, rather than the other way around. So I know many introverts who actually are they would look like if you like showbiz personalities, but they need a lot of time on their own with their thoughts, working things out. There's also a dimension of feeling and sensing. You know, are you a very data-driven, external data-driven process, or something how you feel about something? For instance, I find a lot of entrepreneurs have a very strong reliance on gut instinct. They kind of they know very quickly whether they like something or they don't. They don't really wait for a lot of data on something. So there are a number of these kinds of questionnaires that you can look up, and I've given some links here that you can try to follow. Some of them are free. Some of them I'm not selling any of these. I don't get paid if you do them or not. But and what I'm saying is that even just getting the basic information in these can actually give you some useful insight into how you work. So, for example, again coming back to the 2x2, you have introversion and extroversion on one plane here. And this interest in organization and planning, whether you like it very tight or whether you're very freewheeling, whether you lean a lot of data, whether you're very relaxed about stuff, whether you just go on your gut. And these become important indicators for your working style. Now again, they're only a preference, right? And these are the other ways. You can be very intuitive or you need a lot of data. You can be very thinking oriented, very much in your head or very feeling. So head versus heart. And these are things that vary in people all across all countries. There are slight national differences. I think over the years, especially the Myers-Briggs actually does have national norms and norms for all kinds of professions. So I'll give you an example here of some of the questions you get in these kinds of questionnaires, and you'll see that you're made to make a choice. Now they don't always actually seem to be mutually exclusive. So I really enjoy dreaming up imaginative ideas. I really enjoy getting a job done. So, well, you might do a little bit of both, but they force you to choose, because what you're actually getting at here is a measure of your preferred style, and that's all it is. And you might have a little bit of a preference for one style over another. And what you end up with is you end up with basically being tucked into one of these types. So you can be extrovert, sensing, and thinking, judgmental. So now this does not mean that there are 16 types of people. So these aren't like some kind of modern scientific version of a horoscope. It just that means that in general, you have a particular preference for how you deal with the world, how you deal with people in the world. And this typing gives you some insight into where you are on that map. So just to show you, here's mine. This is my latest one. I've done this every few years for the last, I'd say, 20 years now. And it does stay pretty stable, but it does move a little bit. And I think that often is on the basis of this kind of feedback. I used to be much more J. I used to be much more black and white about things. I'd make my mind up. I would go for it. I would say, that's it. Whereas I've learned over the years to shut up now and again and maybe listen a little bit. So I think I have to confess and say that I have used this as a tool in my work to maybe modify some of my behaviors. And I think that's really, again, one of the things that this kind of teaching, this way of thinking actually, can help you as a leader and a manager, because you do have, no matter how effective your style is, people will have different styles, people will have different ways of doing things. If you're a very visionary leader, if you're a great big picture person who can kind of stare at a blank wall and start painting pictures of how fantastic the future is going to be, that's fantastic for inspiring very visionary people. But it scares the hell out of very sensing people. It scares the hell out of people who are very kind of practical, want the practical details, need to know what they're getting into before they make a move. And every company needs a balance of people to do that. So you don't manage the people the way you want to be managed. You really have to think about leading people in the way they need to be led. So, and remember, these styles are only a preference. And one of the things that we do as we get more experience as managers and as leaders in organizations is you learn to modify your behavior more. You actually can shift styles. You can shift. And the easiest way to do that is to ask for feedback. So maybe as a team and as a group, or maybe as individuals, using the time, we're not going to do it in the time we've left, but maybe as homework, maybe you could start thinking about what is your predominant style, and then how does that affect the way you work. If you're a very detailed person, do you really push that too far? I was working with a company a while back, and the CSO was checking the data of every single person in the company. Remember, there was only 6 people, but it meant that basically all that data collection was being done twice. He was a real detailed person. He was fantastic at it, but 90% of his time was spent doing other people's jobs.
Okay, Michael.
Eventually you get the sensation, well, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just for a second, I would encourage people to perhaps ask some questions. I think it's a good spot to give people some words or some space to ask things. So, if you have any questions that have arisen, just let us know. Write your questions to the chat bar or raise your hand in this interface and form the question to Michael, so I can give you the microphone and you can ask things. Okay, but since until we have the questions, you can just continue.
Yeah. I said as we're winding up and as you're thinking of your questions, it really is as you take this away. In fact, we can maybe go to the. I won't go into these now. But really, it's remember that differences in diversity are fine, but actually in an organization you need it. And one of the key things I always say to people about an organization is you do need to get different, you need a mix of people in every organization. And the most important thing you do in an organization, especially when I come as a consultant from the outside, is to find out what's missing. And that's not to point out as a criticism to the company, but it's to make sure that they get what they need. And sometimes it can be a real difficulty in a company if you have one person who asks the tedious questions all the time when everybody wants to get on and do the exciting stuff, but you can't run the company on excitement alone. And at the same stage, somebody has to put a little bit of vision into the company, so you need that leadership, you need that as well. So just remember that sometimes these things cause clashes, but actually it's not the person you're clashing with. So these things become very personal and very bitter, and it's terrible when you go to a small company and people are not speaking to each other, or things are very tense because he always asks those questions, or she never does what we ask her, she only does this. And actually they're just the styles that are clashing. And if you understand the differences in styles, you can really reduce the stress and conflict within an organization. So the theory behind this, if you like, is that our habitual responses are basically we observe a behavior, we observe a situation, we draw conclusions on our own experience, and we react out of habit. When we get into a much more situational, more flexible kind of management, what you see is you observe behavior, you draw conclusions, but also you take into account, if you like, the lens through which you're looking at it. Because I'm a particular kind of person, for example, I like details. I get very stressed when people start giving me the big visionary picture without the details. Okay, maybe I just need to relax, think, and maybe ask a few questions. Here we go.
Yes, we have a question from Dirk. So Dirk, you are online, so you can ask your question. Dirk, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm not sure you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. So you can ask your question.
It's modern technology. So I was thinking about the composition of a management team, especially in a startup company like my company. How much do you think that investors look into how the different personality styles within the management team work together, or that that's a spread of personality styles within the team?
My experience is that the investors spend a lot of time looking at the team. And if they see, they like to see conflict. They like to see that people challenge each other. They don't want to get into a group where everybody is just agreeing with each other. But they want to make sure that the conflict is contained. If they see that people can't work together or that they're not addressing their issues, they won't invest. I've even, for instance, been work with companies where we've done investor pitches, and the company have actually started to kind of squabble when the investors were there, which is a very bad idea. And of course, it's a terrible thing when that happens. But you could just see that the investors actually were pushing the team until the team facade cracked. And what they were trying to do was see where the fault line in the company was, and they found it. And I think what they will want to see is that they have, like you said, a spread of skills. They want to make sure that they have, like you say, one person who's very steady and responsible, but they want to see that you have the mixture. And if you're all of one type, they know that nobody in the company is saying no, or nobody in the company is saying yes. And what you really have to have is, in companies, can everybody ask questions, and can different people answer different questions at different times? So you can't have one person always asking, why are we doing this? Because it just becomes the whole company against that one person. And what you have to show is the flexibility that people can switch roles. So you become, one person can ask the questions, and then the next time the next person asks the difficult questions. But you will always be challenged on the diversity of your team.
Yeah, I think regarding getting answers in, or well, if they ask questions and go into the details, not all of the details will have been worked out to the final level. And then there will always be discussion within the company, simply, well, how do we answer this? Yes. Because, and I think disagreement there is not bad, as long as you can agree on something, and as long as you can convey the atmosphere that that problem actually will be solved within the company without running people, without having people running off or leaving the company because they are unsatisfied.
Yes, I think you have to have, I think that's exactly right. I think you have to have a certain amount of productive conflict within the company almost. I think you have to be challenging. I think what people look for is to make sure that, as I said, that conflict is somehow contained, that we know we can work this out together, that it doesn't become, you know, people storming out and slamming doors or something like that. We have to find a way to make sure that these, you don't have to solve the problems, you just have to make sure that everybody knows them.
Yep. Good, thank you.
Okay, Michael, I think you can move further where you left. So until we get some additional questions, yeah.
Following on from Dirk's question, really, it's a very important thing in management to value skills you don't have. You know, just make sure hiring people who are different, who can bring a diversity, and look for complementary skills. It's always a very important thing. It becomes very easy to hire people who can sit around and chat about the things that you're interested in. So, for example, within small companies, there's a really big resistance to getting too many business processes. So usually, for instance, the chief finance officer is always the person who's out on his own because they come from a different background. They're not scientists, they're finance guys. They're very much into the detail and the data. And but actually, they're the people who bring the discipline you need to turn your business, your company into a real business. And you just have to be aware that you need that diversity within your company.
Okay, I saw Bo raising hand and trying to ask something. Bo, are you online?
Yeah, I had a question on a bit of a different dimension of diversity, and that has to do with age. And if you have views on, you know, if you see a preferable combination of people at different ages in a company, and I'm thinking particularly about that when we talk about startup companies. You have a few people, everybody have to contribute. So many times, if you have people that are experienced, they can jump right in and contribute very quickly, and that's what you need. In a situation like that, you don't have a lot of funds and so forth. But at the same time, you know, there is a value also of the energy of people that are younger. The older can also have a lot of energy, obviously. But anyway, do you have any views on that type of dimension?
I think that comes back to what I said earlier about look for what your company is missing. And I think if you have a group of very young and very enthusiastic and very energetic people, sometimes, if you like, the calming influence of a person who's been around for a while can be great. Whereas the opposite, if you have a company where the age profile is drifting a little bit, you might need to inject a kind of a younger, more challenging approach to it. So I think it's always about a balance, and it's about every single company is different, and it's more at a company level, doing the analysis and saying what this company needs would be somebody who could bring us this. And then if it's the age, or as I say, the energy mightn't be the right way to describe it, but that level of experience, you know, it's very, very important in the company to have somebody who's seen problems before, not just the technical problems, but has been through the tough times. Because when things get really tough in small companies, as you start to run out of money and this kind of thing, it can be very difficult. And just having that kind of steadying influence can be a very, very valuable thing to have in a company.
Okay, I have also a question from Lars.
We've only got about another minute.
Sorry? Sorry?
We've only got about another minute.
Okay, I think that we can just, as we started 5 minutes later, we can run a bit over. But there is a question from Lars, and there is a question from Stina. So I would give those people to be able to ask. Lars, you're online. Lars?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm here. Do you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. You hear me?
I can hear you, Lars.
Okay. Thank you, Michael, for a very interesting presentation. I think this was very fruitful. First of all, a question of order. Do we get any handouts at all of these pictures you've shown us?
Rate has the slides, and he can make them available either to you individually or you can put them on the website. I don't mind. These are public domain as far as I'm concerned.
Yes,
wonderful.
and also most of the webinar is also recorded and will be put up in the YouTube of Tallinn Park channel. I will send out the link after I have done that.
Okay, very good. Then to my real question is, we as an incubator, we often see, more often than not, I would say, we see a need for a transit from the innovators, founders, to more entrepreneurial management. I mean, we often see that the original founders, which might be researchers, they are very essential in the start, and they will stay essential for the company, but they are very essential to, and they are the only ones who really could lead the company in the initial stages. Whereas after some time, it would be quite obvious that you need another sort of manager on the CEO chair. And this is sometimes a problem that we need to make our entrepreneurs aware of that and bring that with them along the road, so they can be prepared that maybe the better way for them to avail their services to the company would be to work as a research manager, or so I just wonder, Michael, do you have any practical advice how to convey this to these companies to make this transit as smooth as possible?
Michael, are you here? Still there?
Sorry, I'm still here. Sorry, I was muted because I have another call coming in. I was just trying to deal with that. No, this is a very salient issue, and it's an issue that investors find as difficult as founders do. You've heard of this famous founder syndrome, that especially once you start to move up the financial world, that there is almost an urge to try and move on the original people, because it's no longer the simple scientific company anymore, and it demands much more complex management and things like that. I think the real important thing here is expectation management. It really is trying to convince the founder, if you like, that it's like a staged rocket, and they really will only be involved in a certain part, and then they might move on to the board. There isn't any value in telling people that one day you're setting up the next Genentech, or you're setting up the next Merck Sharp and Dome. That's not what it's about. And I think trying to get those expectations ready for people and help them with that transition, because it's going to happen. And when the academics stay too long in the company, or they want to keep too much control, or they want to be CSO, when in fact they might be happier on the board. Academics are very good academic scientists. That's why they get to these jobs. That's why they're professors. But they're not always great business people. And I think it's always worth having that difficult conversation earlier rather than later.
Yeah. So what we're looking at, and we do this, but I was just asking if you have any different ideas on it. But what we do normally is that we try to outline the road of a career, if you like, within the company for the founders. And like I say, a position on the board, a position as research and development management, or any such thing.
No, I think that's. I mean, I don't think there's a magic formula for it. I think it's one of these things that just over the years ago, people tried to turn academics into entrepreneurs, and some of them do, but most of them don't. The skill sets are so different that, in a sense, you just have to be honest about that. And academics already have two jobs. They're always teachers and researchers to begin with, and adding a third job is rarely successful.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Okay, and I will give the floor for the final question, as we are about to finish. Stina, you had raised hand. Are you online now?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Good. I have a question related to Bo's question about age. How do you think leadership style or managing a company will change or develop when new generations enter the labor market? Do you see any risks for cultural clash?
Well, speaking as a 50-year-old male, I'm always concerned when people talk about culture clashes and age. But actually, I point you to my last slide here. If we're thinking about a kind of a coming phase in management, as the very wise man George Bush once said, some things are very hard to predict, and the future is one of them. And I think more and more what we're hearing about is the application of mindfulness in management. And this seems to be something that people are picking up quite naturally. This comes from mindfulness therapy, and now people are just using mindfulness in all sorts of areas of life. And this is essentially just an application, if you like, of kind of almost meditative practice. And this seems to be something that people are taking up. And you see books now on mindful management. 5 years ago, this would have been unheard of. So this seems to be a kind of a coming movement. So it'd be very interesting to see if this takes, and whether this will make any practical difference to management. But the basic idea is take time to make time. I now see people trying to kind of not rush around so much. Younger people are more into the idea of just relaxing as an activity. So I've seen some places now where managers actually deliberately have 5 minutes between major meetings. They don't fill their diaries. They actually take time to recover between things. There's a lot of talking about, make sure you respond rather than react. So I think that there might be a generation or a new theme coming in management, which will be very interesting to see how it pans out in the next few years. So this is why I left it as my last slide. So watch and see if this happens.
Okay. As we have spent our hour that we promised the webinar will last, I will then perhaps give you, Michael, a floor for the final words and to make some conclusions from the webinar. And then I would also like to give a floor to Stina, as on the 28th of February, as long as I understand, is the time where Uppsala will organize the next webinar. So perhaps you would like to say some words about what are your ideas about the webinar topic. But before that, Michael, perhaps some last words from you.
Okay. I just thought that if you did find any of this interesting, you might like to do some homework. Like I said, it's very hard to do any transformational change in an hour. But you might want to take some time and maybe do some of these tests online. I say some of them you pay for, some of them are free. You can decide the value of those yourself. But just look at them as feedback. Look at them as a little kind of opening a little window somewhere else. And think of examples where you've seen your style in action. If you turn to have one particularly strong style especially, think about example, okay, I've seen that in action. Don't fight the feedback. Just listen to it. And if you have a chance, discuss it with a friend or a colleague, over a beer or a glass of wine somewhere, just, do I really do that? Or, have you noticed when I do that? And maybe as a sort of a developmental program for yourself, something to do over the next few months, is on the basis of that, is this something that you would stop doing? Just one thing. Well, maybe I'll try and do less. Maybe say, rather than stop, say, maybe I'll do less. And then maybe think about one thing you could do more of. Maybe I'll try to do a little more of this. But the most important thing is to think of one thing that you do that you keep doing. Consolidate where you're strong. So I would urge people maybe to think about not just coming along to an interesting webinar and then going away, but to take some homework and go away and think about it. And if you wanted to drop me an email sometime from now and let me know how you get on. That'd be great. So thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you also very much, Michael, for being enabling us to attend this webinar. I really enjoyed that. And now perhaps a few words from you, Stina, about the next webinar.
Yes, on the next webinar, which will take place on the 28th of February, as you said, we have invited one of the companies that have that we have supported in their business development. It's a company earlier called Halo Genomics, who went from being a group of researchers from their university around 3 or 4 years ago to today be a successful company who made an exit in only 3 years and has been acquired by the big American international company Agilent Technologies, and we are going to listen to their trip from being researchers at the university to make an exit in only 3 years.
Okay, thanks a lot, Stina, for this short introduction, and I suppose we'll hear more from you soon and see the invitation. And also thank you from my side, all the attendees, as well as Michael as a presenter. And I'm also very happy if I will receive some feedback from you, both from the technical organization as well as the presenter topic. So as you understand, these are only just the first webinars we are organizing, so we are in the learning process as well. And hoping that each time we have the new webinar, it will be better and better, both from the technical organization and the content-wise. So thank you a lot, and tomorrow you will receive a short reminder about feedback, so I would be very happy if you would give some. Okay, thank you and bye-bye.
Bye.